Good evening. It is 7 p.m. I'll call the meeting to order. If we could please stand for the pledge. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and welcome to the February 10th, 2025 business meeting of the Milford Board of Education. I'll do a roll call. Megan Doyle. Here. Scott Furmender.
Present.
Tracy Irby. Here. Tom Koba.
Here.
Lauren Mahler.
Here.
Christina Preet.
Here.
Mike Smith.
Here.
Cindy Wolf-Whiten. Here. And I am here, so there's 9 present. We move on to student reports. We have no one here tonight from Jonathan Law, and the Academy couldn't make it, board members, so their reports will be sent to us. But we have our foreign representatives. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, everyone. It has been a great month at Foreign, and it is a pleasure to speak with you about our school. Before we begin, last week was National School Counseling Week, so we would like to express our appreciation for our school counselors across all Milford schools for the work that they do. It does not go unnoticed. Foreign recently introduced a new faculty member, Miss Stewart, in the science department. We welcome her to our school and are excited to see her join our community. We also welcome 2 student teachers, Miss Madeline Winters from Western Connecticut University for Mr. Stammen. She will be teaching choir and guitar and co-teaching band and peer-assisted classes. And Mr. John Riccio from Albertus Magnus College for Mr. Tupka and Mr. Giacomo. He will be teaching modern world history, U.S. history, and Black and Latino studies. In our Fine Arts Department, choir, orchestra, and band students who made the CMEA Regions Honor Band recently performed in the Southern Regional Concert. Great job to our musicians. Our annual spring play is Seussical this year, and the Drama Club's main stage players have begun rehearsing hard. Ticket sales have just opened online, and we encourage everyone to see the product of our cast and crew's hard work. February 4th was World Cancer Day. Foreign students and faculty wore blue to show support for the cause and raised $181 for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. With Valentine's Day coming up, Foreign's junior class hosts an Adopt a Lion fundraiser where students can buy stuffed lions to send to other students or faculty around the school. And Foreign's journalism program successfully finished their February issue of the Main Street Mirror and continues this month by writing feature stories, which will include spotlights, how-to guides, personality profiles, and more.
To begin with sports, we would like to extend a congratulations to our SEC Winter Scholar athletes, Aiden Stay and Gabriella Gallardo, for their academic and athletic achievements. Great job to both Aiden and Gabby. Continuing on the same note, last week the Milford boys swim team won against Waterford. Big congratulations to swimmers Carter Shearer in the 200-meter freestyle, Nevin Vidosevic in the 50-meter freestyle and 100-meter breaststroke, and Joe Lahab in the 100-meter freestyle for winning first place in their events. Great work to them and the entire team. Similarly, the boys basketball team continues to improve on their season, beating Xavier last week 62-44, further improving their record to 13-4, with big games from Jackson Doyle, Jackson Staples, and John Johnson. Foreign wrestling keeps on rolling with wins against Brantford, bringing their overall record to 25-4. In collaboration with Camp Happiness and Milford Adaptive Programs, they ended up raising over $2,500 for the project Wrestle with Happiness. We wanted to also commend the gymnastics team, earning their highest team score of the season with 120.5, and a big congratulations to junior Kayla Johnson, winning first place all around, first place on beam and floor, and second place on bars and full. To wrap up sports, a huge congratulations to boys lacrosse coach Coach Atkins on being inducted into the Connecticut Lacrosse Hall of Fame. He has coached high school boys lacrosse in Connecticut for nearly 3 decades, won multiple SEC Division II and III titles with Brantford and Foreign, and been named Coach of the Year 9 times by various organizations. Finally, Foreign encourages young voters by allowing all students who will be 18 years old by November 4th to register to vote in the main lobby on February 24th. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening, and have a wonderful rest of your night.
Thank you, Luke and Dobby. Feel free to head out if you have things to do. We will be attending.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anybody in the audience who'd like to make public comment tonight? Okay, seeing none, I'll dispense with the public comment report and move on to the chair's report. So board members, the budget that we passed and adopted last month moves on to the Board of Finance. Now, there's a public hearing scheduled for February 18th. That will be in Conference Room A in Parsons Complex, that's here in this building. Dr. Kutai and I will present the budget to the Board of Finance on February 27th in Conference Room B, again here in Parsons, that's upstairs. The next long-range facilities planning meeting will take place during our committee of the whole meeting on Monday, February 24th, here in the boardroom. And the next community conversation is Saturday morning, March 1st at Foreign, so watch for more information to follow on that. And lastly, the 3rd District has forwarded its nomination to fill the seat left vacant by Ms. Petrosky's resignation. So tonight we have here with us Adam Scobie. Adam is a lifelong Milford resident and attended Live Oaks Elementary, East Shore Middle, and Foreign High School. He resides here in Milford with his young family, and he is currently the Director of Advanced Manufacturing Technology for the Connecticut State Community College System at Housatonic. So welcome, Adam. We're going to take a motion to appoint Adam to the board, and then our city clerk is here to swear him in, and then he can have a seat with us up here at the table for the rest of the meeting. So we have a motion.
Move that the Milford Board of Education appoint Adam Scobie to fill the 3rd District unexpired term of Una Petrowski.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Fermender. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, Adam.
Okay, Adam, so you have to raise your right hand now. Do you solemnly swear and sincerely affirm that you will faithfully execute and discharge your duties and responsibilities according to law as a member of the Board of Education for the City of Milford to the best of your ability, so help you God, or upon penalty of perjury?
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. All right, we can move on to, liaison reports, please. Does anybody have any liaison reports for this evening? Ms. Preet has some.
I do. Milford Convention Council is very busy these days. Tomorrow, in person or virtual, hidden in plain sight at the library, or virtual to 11 at 6:30. Thursday, February 13th, Milford Library for grades 5 through 12 at 6:30. Ditch your device. I'll be using them activities to focus on something other than looking at screens. So that's new and very interesting. They will be doing adult mental health training. Again, a session for on 2/27, a session for adults, and then on 3/27, a session for youth at the West Haven Public Library. All of these items are on their Facebook page. I encourage everyone to follow. There's a lot going on. Milford Public Schools and Milford Public Library are doing a Circle of Security. I guess they just started their first one just this past Thursday. It's an 8-week parenting workshop. There'll be 8 sessions. Those are on Tuesday, 6:30 to 7:30 at the library. Let's see, where's my next one? The Youth Committee recently put together some Stay Present packs for anyone who might be experiencing a mental health challenge. It's a bag that has some candy and worry stones for those younger folks who might be having some anxiety or depression. It's a comfort pack. Let's see, the Student Billboard Contest is back again. Submissions from 6th through 12th graders are by this Friday, the 14th, for the billboards we all see throughout Milford. And then, I think this is the last one. Yeah, it is. Oh no, it's not the last one. They're in the middle of, they had their first session of their shelf care book study for the anxious generation. It's going over 4 months, and there's a certain section of the book that you read, and then they had about 80 attendees on Zoom, and they were broke out into
Breakout session.
Breakout sessions, breakout rooms to discuss. It was a very lively discussion, great conversation. And they'll be doing that at the end of the month for the next 4 months. And then the last thing is they are going to do again this year their tug of war on May the 3rd at Eisenhower Park, 12 to 4, again for to support mental health. Again, all of this is on their Facebook page. I really encourage everyone to follow because they've got lots going on. So,
Thank you. Any other liaison reports? Ms. Doyle?
Thank you. Mr. Fermander and I attended the Permanent Schools Committee meeting last month, and we discussed the finishing up of the Pumpkin Delight project, including the construction of the playground, that which will be coming soon, hopefully. And then we talked about the projects at Law and Foreign that will be moving forward and hopefully breaking ground soon, as we've gotten all the funding and sources set up, and really excited to see the new plans that are going to go forward. And we have a meeting in a couple weeks.
Thank you. Any other liaison reports? Mr. Kobach?
Got a brief one from the Board of Health. This was back in January. Most of this probably isn't new news, but there was avian flu detected in Milford, and somebody had to have several birds put down that, I don't know, I forgot if they were hens or ducks. And the news on the new Board of Health Human Services building on the other end of the parking lot here has run into a snag. There's definitely a ledge under it, and they can't go down. So I know that the architect was looking at alternates, but there was a plan for a parking garage in the basement that can't happen now. So that's all, that was kind of left up in the air at that point.
Thank you. I did attend the last PTA council meeting in January, and I brought them up to speed on the board's work, including adoption of our budget. So no further reports. Move on to Dr. Kutaya's superintendent report.
Thank you, Ms. Glennon. We're going to kick things off this evening with an instructional highlight brought to you by our People Personnel Services Department, which includes Ms. Jennifer Stewart, our director, and Ms. Nadine Macklin, Sarah Collette, and Kim Dunn, supervisors for each level, elementary, middle, and high, respectively. And then wrapping up the instructional highlight will be our Director of Business Services, Matt Cavallaro, to walk you through some excess cost reimbursement work. So we're going to turn things right over to Ms. Stewart.
Thank you, Dr. Kutaya. Good evening, Ms. Glennon and members of the board. So today my team and I are going to give you an overview of special education, which is only one component of the PPS department. Since Dr. Kutaya already introduced members of the team, I won't do that, but I would just share, Matt and I work very collaboratively to go over the budget. Sarah is in charge of the middle school. Kim does high school in transition, and Nadine does pre-K and elementary. So Milford Public Schools offers a variety of services in special education for our students. And it's a journey for our students and our families, and it can begin as early as age 3 and go all the way to 22. And our students are always being supported by our staff along with the families, because it's a connection and building that community, because it is a journey, and sometimes there's some bumps that go through that journey, but we try to make it as smooth as possible. So the team, and we have 2 members of our team, because the PPS department does not just include special ed, Christine Goleski and Andrew Deacon. We've created a vision for our PPS department that really stands for what our core beliefs are, and it's the Pupil Personnel Service Department will provide an inclusive and safe environment where all students belong and have equitable access to high-quality curriculum and instruction. As a result, all students will become valued citizens of our community by demonstrating academic, social, emotional, career, and independent learning skills. And we're in the process of creating our new mission statement. So I want to go over IDA. And IDA is a mandated law, and it's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And it says that any student with an IEP, so a student who has a current IEP and a disability, is given a free and appropriate education. And that was back in 1976, so it's been a long time standing. which goes into the least restrictive environment, which is where we want to make sure our special ed students are spending as much time as possible with their non-disabled peers. And that would be in the general education classroom. And the LRE really can ebb and flow within a school year and year to year based on a student's need. So the LRE kind of goes into this continuum of services. And if you can see, we have a visual that are, it's like a staircase. And we start down on the very bottom, which is step 1, which is where our students with special education needs receive their special ed services in the general education classroom. So that's their least restrictive environment. And then from there, we go to the next step where they're in their gen ed classrooms, but they receive their special ed services pulled out into a resource setting. So it's like a pull-out model. So that's the next step. The third setting is our specialized programs, and later on you'll hear more about our programs that we have in district. And that is where the majority of the day the students spend in the special ed classroom, and they have small opportunities to spend with their non-disabled peers. And then the last step is our out-of-district placement, where we talk about our students who go to a school that's not in our community, and is for just special education students. And that's your most restrictive environment, and that's where we talk about costs, because that's where we have the price of our out-of-district schools have tremendously gone up over the years. So LRE also presents that continuum of services, and like I said earlier, it can flow. A student can go from, say, step 1 to step 2, and back to step 2 and step 1, within a school year, based on their needs at that moment. And that's why we always can go back to a planning and placement team meeting throughout the year to make those adjustments on the students' IEPs to match their needs at that given moment. And if we go to step 3, where our students that are in our programs, we're always trying to look to see where can we give them more opportunities to be with their non-disabled peers. So that's something that the teams always look at with the parents to see where their needs are best met at that time. And then last, the benefits of continuum services really can be flexible, and I cannot stress that enough, where we want to engage our students with their peers, and it's always an individually based process, and you have to always remember the LRE continuum of services is based on the student's IEP, and that's what drives their programming. You want me to click for you?
Sure. Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. So again, I'm Nadine Macklin. I'm the elementary PPS supervisor, and I have the pleasure of supervising our youngest learners, so our 3-year-old students. As young as 3 years old, our students come into our integrated preschool program all the way up to age 5. And so in Milford, we do have 8 integrated preschool classrooms, and the integrated preschool classrooms are comprised of students who have individual education plans or IEPs due to developmental delays, in addition to students who are peer models, so students who do not have IEPs. And so it's a really awesome experience for our youngest learners to really grow and develop together and learn from each other. Our integrated preschool classrooms, there is an AM or a PM session that students have access to 5 days per week. And within our preschool, our integrated preschool classrooms, we have some core instructional practices that we utilize. We have Little Spots, which is a wonderful social emotional curriculum. We also have Haggerty, which is a phonological and phonemic awareness curriculum, which really teaches students those foundational reading skills to really give them the building blocks to become readers. And we also have intentional play experiences. So as you know, the legislation that was passed a few years ago requires that we have purposeful play as early as pre-K on up into kindergarten. Our teachers also give our students opportunities to build on their executive functioning skills through different activities and structures such as the question of the day. They also have the message of the day. Instead of a matrix calendar, they use a linear calendar. Research really supports, their early math skills by using that type of a calendar. as well as who chooses first. So as you can imagine, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, they always want to go first. But this strategy that's employed in our preschool classroom really helps students to wait their turn, but also see when their turn is coming up. We also have 2 self-contained preschool classrooms for our students who require more intensive supports. And again, we have 2 of those classrooms in our district. And again, it serves students ages 3 to 5. And we have similar core instructional practices that are employed in these 2 self-contained classrooms. Little spots for social emotional learning. We also use discrete trials, which really chunks learning opportunities into very, very short chunks. So students will learn for maybe about 2 minutes and then go to something that's more preferred. And we'll go to the next.
So I'm Sarah Collette, I'm the middle school pupil services supervisor. And I'll talk to you a little bit about our resource supports, which exist in grades K through 12 in every school that we have here in Milford. Students access resource room depending on what's outlined in their IEP, so that's a specialized individual recommendation for their instructional time. Resource rooms are learning spaces where special education teachers provide skills and instruct students with either one-on-one, randomized small groupings, and they explicitly teach skills in alignment with general education standards and students' IEP goals and objectives. You might see students with a wide variety of needs within our resource rooms, but common disability classifications could be specific learning disabilities, dyslexia, or other health impairments. So we have specialized programs across our district. We'll go age-wise, so we'll start in pre-K.
Right. So in terms of the specialized programs that we have throughout the district, so in terms of preschool, we have a preschool located at JFK, Live Oaks, and Pumpkin Delight. We also have specialized programs, so we have a behavior support program. We also have a specialized program for students who are on the autism spectrum, and those are located at Half Pen, Meadowside, in addition to Orchard Hills. And then at Mathewson, we have 3 social pragmatic classrooms, so that actually provides students with opportunities for to pretty much enhance their social pragmatic language. So just those social nuances, they really need that specialized instruction to really learn those skills, and that's located at Mathewson. In terms of our behavior support programs, we have classes located at Half Pen, as well as one at Orange Ave.
Middle school, we have at Harborside, we have programs that specialize with the learning needs of students on the autism spectrum, and then at East Shore, we have programs for students who have significant behavioral needs.
At the high school level, we have specialized programs at Law and Foreign. Law has 4 specialized programs, an adaptive program, a life skills program, a behavioral support program, and then Law also houses one of our 18 to 22-year-old transition programs, the Postgraduate Transition Academy Law. Foreign High School has 2 specialized programs. They have a social pragmatic skills program, and they have a behavioral support program. And then here at Parsons, we have 2 transition programs. We have the Postgraduate Transition Academy Parsons, and we also have the 5th year vocational experience, or 5, here also.
Oops, wait, I didn't push it. There we go. All right, so a little bit more about our specialized programs. So specialized programs are more specialized for a reason. Our students have some more significant needs. And the time that they spend within our specialized program classrooms and the time that they spend with non-disabled peers is outlined in their specific individual education plans. So our adaptive classrooms provide academic and functional skill instruction. They also support activities of daily living and independent living skills.
Our social pragmatic classrooms provide academic instruction and help our students really understand appropriate interactions with their peers and the subtleties within interpersonal communication. And our behavioral support programs provide academic and social skills, as well as a classroom-wide behavior plan, as well as some individual behavior plans specific to students. Again, we serve a variety of needs within our specialized programs, but commonly you may see students classified under the primary disability of emotional disabilities or the autism spectrum disorders. All of our classrooms provide instruction specific to students' goals and objectives. That might be in a one-to-one instruction, a very small group, or in co-treating sessions, meaning 2 different certified staff providing targeted instruction specific to one shared goal and objective. So that may look like a special education teacher and a speech-language pathologist, or speech and an occupational therapist. There's a variety of ways that we can do that.
So the district has 3 transition programs, which allow us to provide required services for students who have completed their high school requirements, but are still eligible for special education services until they reach age 22 or before if the IEP team agrees. And they are, as I said, PGTA Law, PGTA Parsons, and the 5 program. Primarily, students who are 18 to 22 are in these programs, and typically they're for individuals with intellectual disabilities, those on the autism spectrum, or those with multiple disabilities. And the purpose is really to assist young people with learning the soft skills that they need in order to transition to the adult world. Typically we're focusing on post-secondary education, getting students ready either for the next step, a training program, looking at work readiness skills and soft skills they would need to go into competitive or supported employment, and also independent living skills such as banking, budgeting, cooking, how to take care of a household, and also activities of daily living, taking care of their own selves. These skills are typically worked on in real-world settings, so you see a lot of our transition programs, the young people are going out into work experiences, and also our 5th-year vocational program runs the Parsons Perks program, so they have their own coffee shop. One of our PGTA programs has right now a shirt business where they've been making shirts and selling them within the Parsons Perks, but also in different pop-up stores that they do around town sometimes. And during this time, they earn a small stipend, so they're getting a paycheck. They're working on their banking and budgeting skills, all in this real-life setting. And in addition, in our transition programs, the special education teachers are working with adult service agencies and families to help bridge that gap from when students are no longer eligible for services and they're moving on to the adult world. So we work closely with VRS and DDS services.
Hello, I'm Matt Cavallaro, the Director of Business Services. Special ed funding has become an increasingly hot button topic, both in the federal government as well as the state legislature. What we're going to focus on tonight is the excess cost grant, which is a state reimbursement for students who live in district but attend outplaced facilities whose expenditure, both tuition and transportation, exceed 4.5 times the cost of a regular ed student, or 100% of the cost if the state places the student in the district. An example of that would be if DCF removed a child from their home or the judicial system and they're placed in sort of like a foster care or something along those lines. So when at the end of each fiscal year, the business office submits a year-end report called the EFS report, which calculates all of our expenditures for the year, including the grants and everything, and comes up with a per pupil expenditure. For this fiscal year, the per pupil expenditure is $25,393 to educate a regular ed student. The excess cost threshold, which is 4.5 times that, would be $114,270. So to be eligible for this reimbursement, the cost needs to exceed that dollar amount. Just a simple example, if a student's tuition and transportation cost was $164,270, the Milford Public Schools would be eligible for a $50,000 reimbursement from the state. How we submit the information to the state, the PBS team submits a report to the state called the Special Education Excess Cost Grant Report. This is done 4 times a year. The initial report is due on December 1st, which is basically an estimate or the best guess of the outplaced students at the time, what their tuition will be, if they require any services, and their transportation. The second time, March 1st, you're refining your guesses based on a little more data, more months, more invoices. The September 1st deadline, that's when you have to dial into the final figures based on the expenses and invoices for the entire year. And then the January 31st, that is after the auditors review the data, if there's any adjustments, that is the final point in which you have to file this information. So unfortunately, this allocation is typically underfunded at the state level. So we always don't receive the full amount of the reimbursement in which we were due based on the eligibility criteria. So what the state uses, they use the Angelic rankings, which is basically a measure of the town's wealth that looks at the property tax base by individual, the income by individual, as well as the grand list. And then they rank the towns 1 through 169, I apologize, and then they group it. 1 through 58 is reimbursed at 60% of the total reimbursement rate, 59 through 114, 62.1, and 115 to 169, 64.2. For this current fiscal year, Milford is ranked 55th. And unfortunately, these reimbursements continue to decrease year after year. Fiscal 25 is the lowest I've ever seen it. Just for some context, in fiscal year 22, the reimbursement rate was 80%, and it's dropped to 60 in just two short years. And so the final slide, for some examples of the costs that we're facing and how they factor into this reimbursement. I took a sample of 4 students that we're currently paying for. Student A, which is the highest expenditure for a student. We're roughly going to receive about $110,000 in reimbursement for this student. Student B, just barely over the threshold, roughly around $2,000. Student C will receive no reimbursement, so the full cost of that student will be paid for by the board, and student D is barely above the cost of a regular ed student, so again, there will be no reimbursement. And as Jen previously stated, we are responsible for educating these students from age 3 to 22, or if their birthday falls within the school year, it could be 23. And just from my experience and what we're seeing, we're starting to outplace students at a younger age. So there is a possibility that we are paying these expenditures from age 3 to 23 for 20 years. So it is quite a burden on the school systems around the state, and as the reimbursements and the funding continue to drop, that burden is being placed more and more on the local Board of Education.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll take any questions.
Questions from the board? Mr. Fermender.
the presentation spoke about the transition programs, and I understand those seem to be for students who are within the school system. Are there transition programs for students who might have been outsourced to ACES or some other program like that?
Yes, so students certainly within our own schooling system, like the Milford Public Schools, are eligible for our transition programs. However, yes, students who are outplaced, they are also eligible for transition programs. Certainly, we try and bring them back to our own transition programs if appropriate, but sometimes that's not the most appropriate placement for them. So students do have to go to an out-of-district placement for their 18 to 22-year-old schooling.
Would they remain at, if they're at ACES, would they remain there? Would they go to another facility beyond that?
So that's based upon the individual students' PPTA planning and placement team meeting. So certainly some may stay at their, at an ACES or where they are. Some might need to move to a different transition program if there's other services that are more appropriate for them.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Irby?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I lost track in you giving us the specialized programs. So there's different programs in different schools. So the students would follow the programs and as needed, so even if they're not in that school neighborhood? For
Correct.
any of the levels?
Correct, so they might not be in their home school, they might be in a school that houses that program.
All the way up to the high school level?
Correct.
And then for transportation for the students, is it all very individual in transportation, or?
Some students they all can receive transportation, and then we will bus them within the district. So if they're, let's say they go to a program and they're not it's not in their home school, we still transport them.
On like a bus stop schedule, like if, right,
So it's a little more individual.
More individual than that? Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Ms. Irby, there are district programs, and this would have a facility impact, since you are working on a facility. Right now, they're housed where we have space. We're bumping into some problems with that. Based on, I think, if you remember, we moved some programming from last year to this year.
Right.
So that would probably be something that we would need to program for the programs when we're considering facilities. So they are district programs that all of our students can access, and right now we just put them where there is space.
Thank you.
Other questions from board members? Mr. Smith?
Yeah, two questions. The first one, on the last slide you showed about the examples of tuition. Student B and student D have nothing in the transportation line. Does that mean we're educating them in district? Is that?
No,
Okay.
it could be whether their parent decides to bring them every day. There could be a residential setting where they actually live at the school. The expenses to transport those individuals to their school is not being paid for by the board.
Okay, cool, thank you. And the next question is about the transition services that Mr. Perlmutter mentioned. So shifting, I guess, wearing the other hat that isn't here. So 10 years ago, working on this in my other job, or I guess my job, not my volunteer job, hearing struggles of parents who were in their 50s and 60s and struggling with trying to find coverage to help with their autistic 250-pound adult son so they can go do grocery shopping. Curious what the current experience is with the transition from kind of being in our charge of working with DDS or working with BRS or working with Bridges, and kind of what that is, if there are wait lists or how it's working, and kind of what happens next to those families in our community.
Yeah, so certainly every family's, experience is different. In public education, we provide services to students because, obviously it's best for them and legally we have to. Certainly the adult service agencies that families work with, families really have to advocate for their individual and their young person. If you're not advocating for your child, most likely you are not going to be just offered services and offered, basically a dollar amount for your child. So certainly, you know, I've worked with a lot of, you know, a DBS transition coordinator. I've worked with a VRS representative that we work closely with this year, and they seem very great. They are in contact with families and reaching out, but certainly, you know, that's not going to be every family's experience. And there are waiting lists. You know, if you're on the autism waiver and you're not eligible for DBS, I heard today the autism waiver list is about 10 years long. So, you know, there would be a very significant gap in services for some families.
We're actually, in an effort to try to assist families with that, at the middle school level, we're messaging out to families that this is a very long wait list, please apply sooner rather than later, and we're, you know, willing and able to partner with families and help them with that paperwork so that they're not in situations like that if we can avoid it.
Yeah, and thank you, and that's encouraging. And I guess the other question is, I've heard some stories from around the state recently that when other districts, when they try and do that transition, they meet with closed doors or inability to access the state agencies, but is that your experience, or have you had it sounds like you have a better connectivity?
Yeah, I think our transition program, our teachers, we have a transition coordinator and a teacher leader here in special ed. They have very good working relationships with both, you know, our VRS contact and our DDS contact. They come to a lot of our 18 to 22-year-old PPTs, so they're involved, you know, for a durational time with families. And they obviously have a lot of information that they convey to families and can give them tips and tricks of who to contact in various agencies to get information and the services that, you know, are offered. So I've had a very good experience with the people we're working with here in Milford.
Thank you.
Ms. Mahler?
Couple of quick questions and then a more fun, open-ended. A lot of this seems to rely very much on the IEPs, which are constantly updated because they're driving obviously specific services for individuals whose needs are changing on a regular basis sometimes. How often are we, based on our current staffing and structure, able to reevaluate IEPs for students?
So a student needs to be reevaluated every 3 years to determine eligibility, but within those 3 years, target assessments can be done by the school team to get levels of performance.
And additionally, we have meetings annually just to plan for students. We're required to have them annually, but additionally, we have review and revise meetings more frequently as the parents feel like they would like to discuss services or the school team sees the need to increase or decrease services.
Okay, so there's a guaranteed annual reevaluation process that occurs within that 3-year context, but if families request, there can be a more regular evaluation. Correct. And is there I feel like I've picked this up in presentations we've had before, because it's such a team situation for each student, are those teams able to take what they're seeing in the classroom on a daily basis with each student and say, hey, I think we need to reevaluate? Are they able to initiate that as well, or does it have to come either annually or from a parent?
It can come from the school team or the parent.
Okay, so whoever is seeing something that is requiring revision does have the ability to do that, and we do have the resourcing in place to actually act on that when that occurs? Okay. Other question on the excess cost. Based on the timeline that you gave us of estimated cost, updated costs, final costs, our audited data, when does that audited data on January 31st typically turn into actually seeing the funds at whatever level?
So the state, so it's kind of, doesn't really follow that schedule.
Sure, of course. That's the question.
So, the driver of what we receive yearly is the March 1st filing. So we'll get 75% of what we're eligible for around that March 1st deadline, a little bit after, once they calculate all the figures, and then the rest of it comes in May.
And that's for the current year or for the previous year that was audited?
For the current year.
Okay.
If there are adjustments to the September 1st filing or the January 31st after the audit, that actually gets either added if there was more or subtracted if there was less from the following year's ECS funding to the city.
Okay, so it doesn't get reconciled with the March 1st, it kind of then moves on its own?
Yeah, it's kind of always like a floating, because
Yeah.
you know, if they're driving what we report on March 1st for our funding, if we have a student move into the district March 2nd, we're not eligible to claim that reimbursement for that student. So that's why they kind of keep it always, it's like a moving target where they give us what they can based on one of the filings, and they continue to refine it as well. And also another factor that plays into it is it's pooled all together into one. They take every city who submits these reports and puts it into one allotment. I believe the total cost of special education outplacements for the entire state is somewhere around $243 million. Typically, the state has funded the excess cost grant at around $181 million yearly. So again, that also, if they don't see that amount of expenditures and there's funds left over per chance, that also gets factored into the ECS funding to the city in the following year.
Okay, so we're not delayed by a year, because it's
No.
based on the March 1st, not the January 31st, but
Correct.
that's where the sort of reconciliation with the
It just
ECS occurs
continues
along
to
the
happen.
way.
Yes.
When the leftover pieces, students who move in on March 2nd,
Mhm.
do they get factored in and reconciled at the same rate or on a separate way? So like if someone comes in on March 2nd, do they get reimbursed potentially at that same 60% or whatever it was?
They would have to reach the threshold first.
Sure,
Yeah,
right.
but
But whatever
yes.
their reimbursement was, Milford itself would receive that same percentage even though they came after the March 1st? Okay.
Yes. Yes, so it's all driven by actual invoices that the schools send us.
Okay, so there's no benefit to receiving through a little twist of accounting
No.
higher reimbursements
No.
for something that comes after the March 1st
No, I mean,
filing?
Probably the best way to do it would be to lowball your guesses, the initial estimates on December 1st to, kind of the reverse. Instead of someone moving in, somebody actually moving out, that you were factoring and anticipating a significant reimbursement. So you don't, the goal is not to aim high in hopes that we incur these costs. You kind of want to be realistic and somewhat conservative, because if you have a student move out that you were really focusing on, getting a reimbursement for, and they leave and they don't hit that threshold, that could have very detrimental impact to the budget.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, that's helpful. Thank you. That added a lot more detail and context around that, so thank you.
Can I just hone in on one quick thing?
Yep.
So I just want to clarify this to make sure there's no misunderstanding. You said on March 1st, we get 75% of what we qualify for. So we're getting 75% of the 60% that we would get, correct?
So 75% of our total allotment. So for this fiscal year, based on all of the data and all the students that were submitted, we are scheduled to receive about $1.5 million. So we'll receive 75% of that 1.5.
And the total allotment is based on 60%?
Yes.
Is our threshold,
Yes,
right?
yes,
So
yes.
don't want people to think we're getting
So-
75%.
Yeah, so if we were being reimbursed 100% of the students who qualified, or who reached the threshold and exceed it, Milford would stand to receive about $2.6 million of reimbursement. Being cut for that, for the 60% reimbursement, we were receiving about 1.5 this fiscal year.
Sorry, Ms. Muller, I think you
No.
had some more questions.
Absolutely. No, that's great. I was taking us in a different direction, so thank you for the clarification. In looking at the specialized programming, where some are at some schools, some aren't at other schools, and we're paying the cost and the additional resources to transport and shuffle kids around so they end up in the appropriate classrooms, as the other half of our brain here on the board is looking at the potential physical space that we're going to live with in the next 10 years or so, is there a benefit from a programming perspective in the specialized classrooms to having them co-located? to somehow managing to not say, well, there happens to be a room over here, we'll put that guy over there. Happens to be a room over here, we can put a classroom over there. Is there a benefit to bringing these together into a single physical location? At varying levels, and does that change?
That wouldn't be a least restrictive environment. That
We're
would,
not allowed to do that.
you can't bring them all under one roof. Federally, that would not be allowable, to put all of our students with special needs in one school. Is that what you're, I interpreted your question that way, is that correct or not?
Partially an answer, but also partially me not being clear. The least restrictive environment, obviously we prioritize keeping students in classrooms, keeping students in integrated classrooms. But as you said, there are some very specific specialized classrooms for situations and individuals where that's not an option. And right now, from what I think I was hearing you say, those specialized classrooms where that is their least restrictive environment, those are scattered into places where we have space.
But
currently.
Those programs also allow for our students in those classes to have access to gen ed rooms with their typical peers, and that is also part of their LRE. So while their placement may be in a behavioral class, to the degree possible for each child, and that answer is different, that child may spend some time with typical peers, let's say in physical education, or maybe for morning meeting, or at lunch and recess. So
so there is a benefit. It's not just because we happened to have a classroom in this building, therefore we took it for this. There is a benefit to having that classroom in that general ed location, because then there's the ability to potentially flow back and forth depending on the individuals. Are there situations where that's not the case? Are there specialized classrooms that are so isolated in a way that they don't have the need for that flow back and forth?
No.
Or is it not?
categorically, that would not apply.
Categorically is the question.
Again, it's all individualized, right? So you would not say that this category of class, kids never leave. Like it's these children are best suited with more of their time here, and this could change. In September, it could be one decision, and then November, we are having success with intervention, and the data's being pulled, and the team says, hey, let's let Sarah spend some time at recess with her peers for 1 day a week, and let's see how that goes. And so, and I think special education, at least today in 2025, is much more about being out among an integrated general population as opposed to what may have occurred at one time where we housed them all in one space.
That's very helpful. On the flip side then, is there a benefit to having, based on the numbers, just not being familiar with numbers and the trends and the patterns, is there a benefit to having these specialized programs, or at least the space to house the specialized programming as it changes in each location, rather than having to pull students from their home schools and put them where a specialized class fits them at that time? Is there a benefit to having more physical space to accommodate additional specialized programming at the various locations to cut down on the cost and the need to move these students around from their home schools?
I don't know that you need a behavior program in 8 elementary schools. Albeit having 4 at Orchard Hills is not the answer either. So I think as part of you referred to the other side of your brain, we may want to look at regionalizing the programming as opposed to creating one in every space, because that doesn't become efficient. So we have teams of school psych, school counselor, social worker, teacher, leader, principal, and they start to become efficient in programming for behavioral programs. So you wouldn't want 8 schools with 8 behavior programs with 8 teams all doing, so we may want to regionalize some of that. So maybe we have west side of town behavior program, middle town behavior program, east side. But But that would be part of a conversation on the program side that we would have when the board is looking at number of elementary, where in town they would be located, so.
Right. No, that's really helpful.
It's a kind of sort of yes to your answer.
No,
But no.
The kind of sort of yes was a good answer, so thank you. I didn't even need you guys, I could have just asked that anytime. But as we are looking at the footprint, and not to veer us off on a hole here, and I promise I'm wrapping up, I can see all your faces. The main objective is to align facilities to accommodate programming, and that includes general ed and special ed. And so having a better understanding of how those two fit together and how they integrate back and forth and what that flow can and should look like, and building that level of flexibility into the physical footprint of what the district could and should look like going forward is very helpful. So, thank you.
Well, Ms. Molly, if you marry, long ago, we took a tour of all the buildings. If you marry those tours with this conversation, I think on the facility side, the needs are greater in some areas, such as resource rooms. Right now, we have classrooms that are divided by bookshelves or dividers, and we have specialized instruction in small group or one-on-one occurring in the same space at the same time with voices talking on top of each other. So that would be, I would say, a priority physical space need for this presentation. Another is ensuring that there's a mental health suite or an area where our mental health staff could work together. Because usually when there's a social worker working with a family, there's also a school counselor or school psych working with a student. And those services, the collaboration of that are invaluable. And then appropriate space for related services like occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech services. Those are all also often in less than adequate physical spaces. So I would just asterisk, as related to this presentation, those types of spaces over the specialized programming. Specialized programming, we need a full classroom. And so we would just have to bake out, if there are 24 sections, we'll need 2 or 3 classrooms for specialized spaces. So it's those other little pieces that we're taking, server rooms or closets, and revamping that so we can have a little table to do speech. That's probably the priority as related to the, I see them nodding. They know the closet I'm talking about.
And that was one of the big takeaways from the tours that we had, is that those resourcing spaces were severely inadequate. So I think it's important for us to factor that in, but then to also look ahead and not just say, since that's the point of the 10-year plan, is to not look and see what we need to fix right now, but how do we fix that and then plan ahead for whatever comes next. So,
an educational
thank you,
piece for some of our population who hasn't been in school for a while is that a lot of these students who are attending our specialized programs at one time were not in public schools. Those were students that were underserved or sent to specialized schools out of district. So we have the great benefit here in Milford, as many other districts do, that we have specialized programming so that we can serve students here.
thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you.
Sorry, not to prolong this, but those questions is, don't expect an answer now, but as we're planning out the 10 years, in the next part of the conversation, curious if there's a threshold where, right, one of these students, it was $297,000 in total expenditures. If in the last 3 years, we've decreased the excess cost reimbursement by 20%, as we're thinking out 10 years in the future, is there a point in time when the census of individuals with this certain high acuity of need, what is that census level that it makes sense to bring them back in-house, right? Like standing up our own programs to reduce costs.
We ask ourselves that all the time.
Okay.
And it's not an individual decision, actually, the entire team has to agree to that.
Yeah.
And you could read lots of headlines around districts who have tried to bring students back and gotten themselves into trouble.
Yeah,
So
certainly.
it's
Certainly.
a little contentious. But the state also has a task force, you may know, that is studying the exponentially rising costs of outplacement students.
Yeah, and I guess the last question is, it would be informative for me to know what roughly our outplacement costs were 10 years ago versus this year, as we're starting to contemplate what we want it to look 10 years from now. So, not a today question, but like understanding the trend line and the exponential growth.
I don't know that we could predict the 10 years, though.
Obviously, but at least knowing what we have, what the path we traveled the last 10 years helps
We can easily grab a budget book and look at that.
Going back to the comment you just made, Dr. Kataya, on the task force, so I also have seen that something to keep an eye on in the budget state budget going forward, that I think I saw there might be a grant program for districts that are developing more in-house programs, which we've talked about that often, about developing more in-house programs, so something to keep our eye on in terms of some
I'm
potential.
skeptically hopeful.
I know.
There's more nodding over here, so there might be some more information.
Those grants wouldn't come into play until fiscal year '27.
Right, yeah,
So
but they're
there's some
potentially out there, and they're only still potential grants,
And
so.
there's already red strings with it, right? Red tape, sorry.
Yeah.
I got that thing together, yeah. Strings attached, red tape.
Ms. Irby, do you have another question?
I did.
I'm gonna make that trend.
Could we also
Red
get your projected numbers of growth for special education? Like, even in the lower tier, the ones with just the 504s and the IEP numbers? Or do you?
So are you asking for numbers by district-wide of how many students are identified in district?
And where do we think that will go?
Projected out, you mean?
Yeah.
I think that would
Currently,
be
we're
very
at
difficult to do.
17%,
We are at 17%.
and that number has increased along with the trajectory of the state. I remember the days when it was like 12, 13%. I anticipate, you guys jump in, I just think it's gonna grow this number.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not gonna be long before we hit 20%.
Ms. Doyle?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. It was very helpful to go through this so detailed. It's a similar vein that we're discussing. What's the state average for a district of our size of students who have IEPs?
So the state average is about 17.5%.
Okay, so we're pretty on target for where we are in comparison. How many students do we have on outplacement?
About 70.
Okay.
70?
Yep. Ms. Mahler brought up some of the questions that I had. I think that there's the opportunity that we can really look forward in the future to have more in-district placement, especially in terms of space and facilities. Besides space and facilities and money, what resources are most needed to help you in the future that we can think about long-term?
Can you think as a team and get back
Of
to me?
course. Yes.
Thank you.
So I could probably give you some things that
Somebody's got something.
you're not really thinking about. So if you were to develop a program to bring back students who are outplaced, who are of significant need, that are high cost to the district, not only would you need space and staffing and everything in that vein, but you would also see an increase in workman's comp claims,
Insurance
liability insurance. So it's not just, educational programming and space. There's the insurances, there's the health of our staff, there's even staffing these programs. I mean, when you're dealing with such a specialized program, you need a specialized staff member. So acquiring those staff members is difficult, and you would definitely see your insurances significantly increase.
So there's a cost benefit of bringing these students in and the outplacements in terms of those other costs that we're not really thinking about. We're thinking about the benefit of the student being in town and how can we decrease our costs, but there's always additional costs, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's definitely a fine line, because these specialized schools, a majority of them are for-profit organizations, and most of them specialize in a certain disability, and they're typically the only game in town. So so sometimes if you have a student and they don't have any space, they won't take that student. if there's nowhere else for the student to go, they can raise the price to whatever they see fit. An example from my prior district, they had an outplacement facility go up 26% in a 3-year period of tuition costs. There was a student who had a residential setting, and that school was looking to put in a new restroom, shower, facilities. Those costs were given to the district as well.
Oh, wow.
So these places are looking to make a profit, and this is just strictly my opinion. I think they were significantly impacted during COVID and lost quite a bit of money, and they're looking to recoup those losses on the backs of these children and the local Board of Educations. So, there definitely is that balance to whether starting your own program and even having parents agreeing to have the child come back to the local district.
If the child's thriving.
Yeah.
It's hard to convince them to come back in town or things like that.
And if you stretch that thought, Ms. Doyle, you also have to consider the impact on the rest of the school community.
Right.
And what that does to the support staff, the principal who is now overseeing a very specialized program, and school counselor, psych, social worker, though that may not be in their sweet spot. So now we're thinking about training and the impact of potential behaviors or actions of a group of students on the rest of the community there. So there's a tipping point, right? Like, it really is better for some students to be served in a specialized school.
And the rest of the students in the district.
And it's best for everyone too. And then sometimes it's best that that specialized program occur here.
Right.
And so it's always a depends answer, which could be frustrating, but.
I think it comes back to the point where we need to have flexibility in the future, and
Yes.
we're limited in our physical spaces to offer the programs that we would like to offer in-house. And we may not expand them significantly, but we want to be offered the best opportunities. This is more of a comment than anything else. It's incredibly frustrating to see that Milford is 55 on that list and we get 60% back. When, if you look at our numbers in the district, we are wealthy, but that's such an ironic term of what it is and how we are able to do. So to get 60% back is very difficult, and especially in light of 2022, 3 years ago, we're at 80%. 80% is 5 teachers, like at a regular level. Like, what are we talking about? It's a lot of money. So I think the state should support us, but that's a different conversation. So.
Other questions?
I have
Ms. McPoynton?
First of all, I really appreciate your presentation and all the questions that were asked tonight. I think it was a really terrific discussion. Just following up quickly, 17% of our students are special ed. You said that 70 are outplaced. That makes how many in district?
70%, 70 is included in that 17%. Because it doesn't matter if a student is in district or out of district, it's the entire, they are still considered Milford Public Schools.
Right, but if we have 70 students who are going out of district, how many do we have in district?
About 1,000.
About 1,000, okay. And toward the beginning of the presentation, you gave us, you showed us some slides of the different tiers with the continuum of services. Are there ever any students that fluctuate within an academic year, that they might be in district 3 days a week and out of district 2 days a week, or are they typically either or?
Typically either or, but we've done some work this year, like a student that's been out of district and moving them slowly transitioning back into Milford Public Schools. So they kind of ebb and flow between, like, say, step 4 and step 3.
And that's a normal thing that
It's okay
can
to
very
do.
often happen.
It can happen, yes.
Okay.
Especially with like resource and
general education, the lower tiers, so to speak. Like our goal is to have students as integrated as possible, so we do see those shifts within the school as possible.
In this situation, though, your goal is you're bringing the child back in so that you are trying to like gradually reacclimate them to be here totally. So it's,
Correct.
at some point, they're going to come back and it's going to stop, so.
Correct.
But if I'm understanding you correctly, and again, like thinking about space and long-term, at the start of the school year, let's just say, you could have 15 students in a classroom and, you know, over the course of the years, maybe 3 who were outplaced could come back in district and into that classroom.
It could happen.
Okay.
It could happen.
And could it go the other way?
It could happen.
Okay. Lots of coulds and maybes, okay. Okay.
Any questions? So all my questions were answered, but I do want to make one plug for Milford Public Schools because we made a, in talking about the preschool piece and the intentional play being a mandate now. So, however, in Milford Public Schools, we directed our administration to move in that direction many, many years ago. So we're ahead of the curve there, and I'm grateful for that. I'm very grateful for that. Any other questions or comments on this? If not, we'll move on to the next.
We'd like to thank our team.
Yes, thank you very much.
And
Very
like our students, if you have homework, you can go home and. Not the police department in the room, just the. Thanks for your patience, everyone. I'd like to turn things over to Mr. Nielsen, so he could provide us with our annual safety and security update. And there are many guests in the room, not really guests, team members, family members. Captain Del Monte's joining us.
We have copies of that, Dr. Patani?
Yeah, sorry. I am no Pam Griffin, sorry.
I know.
You don't want to say anything.
All right. Well, good evening. My name is Jeff Nielsen. I'm the Director of Safety and Security for the school district. I've met many of you before at our prior presentations, board members. So a little background about myself. I've been here about 10 years in the district. Prior to this role, I worked with the Milford Police Department for 20 years. I was in the crime prevention unit for my last probably 6 or 7 years. And a good portion of that was focused with working with the schools, both our public schools and our private schools here in Milford following the tragedy in Sandy Hook. So I bring a lot of experience to this role. Tonight with us, we have Captain Garen Del Monte, who's our school liaison for the police department. He'll introduce the SRO shortly as part of the presentation. We really value the partnership that we have with the Milford Police Department. It's second to none. And as you'll see through the presentation, there's many more partners we have on such many different levels to support what we do and the work we do here in the district. So, to start off, as always, I like to align my presentation with the board's commitments, right? Your vision statement, your mission statement, but these 2 particular commitments. Strengthening relationships and partnerships, that's key for us, as I mentioned before, for our success in what we do here. And the second is maintaining a safe and secure climate. That's on the physical security piece also, but a lot of what I do rolls into some of the roles of the PPS department with Dr. Christy Angeleski and some of the Safe School Climate initiatives, and you'll see that in this presentation tonight as well. Okay, very simple, 3 parts to our security program here in Milford. We have prevention, we have security layers, and we have partnerships. The prevention is very heavy here. We would rather prevent things than respond to things. Even though we can respond to things, and we're very good at it, we'd rather prevent things. So I would say we're very heavy weighted on that piece of the program. Security layers, we're going to talk a little bit about people. We're going to talk a little bit about the equipment and technology we have in the district here to provide those safest school environments for our students and our staff and our families. And then lastly, we'll get into the partnerships again. That'll be a big portion of Captain Del Monte's presentation when he talks about the SRO program. So when you think about our program, let's go back here for a second. If I could summarize this, and some of you have heard me say this in prior presentations, and I'll say it again, and I'll say it in future ones. Our goal is to increase time and distance, right? We have identified threats and hazards in our school district. We want to increase that time and distance for those things that impact us. At the same time, we want to reduce the amount of time it takes to make our school members and our campuses aware of those identified threats and hazards as they're happening, and to take response actions. In the same token, we also want to make sure that our first responders get that immediate response of what we're doing, and they can come and help us as well. So that would summarize my presentation. I'm going to keep you here longer. Everybody laughing. I'm going to liven it up a little bit, right? Okay. All right. So, prevention. As I mentioned before, very heavy in this area. We'll start with our school incident management manual. This is a plan. It's a plan for supporting all 4 phases of emergency management. You can see the cycle up there on the screen. It's an all hazards approach. So I mentioned before, identified threats and hazards. We've worked with all of our stakeholders, whether it's police, fire, health, student transportation, to identify the what ifs in Milford, what can happen. And then how are we going to prevent those? How are we going to mitigate things? How are we going to respond, and how are we going to recover? So that's all built into our plan. And I wish I could say that I made the plan myself, but I didn't. We follow state standards. So the state of Connecticut provides a template. We take that template and we modify it to what we do here in Milford. And we take best practices from the local, state, and federal levels. So what works best for everybody else works pretty good for us with some tweaks. In those templates, there's 14 standards that the state of Connecticut follows. We follow all 14. And those are important not only to provide consistency in what we do, but it also helps out in other areas such as receiving grant funds for different things we want to do in the district. And we update that plan annually with the state. If things changes during the school year, we'll update it as well. Training. Again, very big piece of prevention. We like to train all of our employees annually, and then we supplement that with drills and exercises throughout the school year. So our training for employees, we train all the way down to substitute teachers. And I'll just tell you, there's going to be an article coming out probably in a month with Connecticut Insider. And they interviewed me about our training, what we do here for substitutes specifically. And they were looking at the state. And she said, I interviewed a substitute teacher from Milford, and they said they felt very comfortable in the classrooms here. And they've subbed in other districts in the state of Connecticut. So I think we do a pretty good job of reaching out to every employee to make sure they know what to do in the event of identified threat and hazard to take care of those kids in that classroom. Our crisis drills at our schools, we're required to do 1 drill per month of occupancy. We do an extra drill per year. So we're doing 11 drills. And our SROs over here, Garen will talk about in the presentation, they assist with a lot of our crisis drills, not only at their schools, but they also assist at some of the elementary schools when they're available to do that. Our school bus safety drills, they're done twice a year in partnership with Durham. We'll continue to do those. Great success. We get excellent feedback from everybody that's involved. Our exercises with first responders. So we'll do different things throughout the year. This year, we tried something new. And you can chime in on this if you want to. We wanted to see all the technology and the things we have in place at the dispatch center. We wanted to see how it works in a scenario. So we established, myself and Captain Del Monte established this mini exercise to test how the dispatchers would get information from a school that there was something going on. We used an armed shooter situation. And then how they would get the responding officers there the quickest and get them into the building, the closest door of the building, for example. And we use a lot of things. We use cameras, we use radios, we use floor plans, all different things to enhance what we can do, our capabilities, and reduce the time it takes for them to get into the buildings. And it was a huge success. We did it at elementary school in, was it April? Mm-hmm. Yep. And we did one of the middle schools over the summer before school started, and our next one will be the high school. And some of the SROs participated in that. We created a video for the police department to show them all those technologies and those capabilities that are there. So the dispatchers and responding officers have a real full circle of understanding of what's at their fingertips. And it was very successful. We've actually modeled that out to some other districts to share with them, taking out some of our specific stuff just to exercise that piece. That's one of the most important ones, right? Response. If we're going to respond, let's get there quick and let's take care of what we need to do. Last piece of this is debriefings. If we have something that happens in district, we're sitting down with our district-wide school safety and security group, which is all of our stakeholders, not only school employees, but again, police, fire, health, and student transportation. What worked well, what can we do better, and we put that in an improvement plan, and we update our annual plan. Committees and teams. So we have committees and teams on the district level and on the individual level. And you can see we have a safety and security committee, we have a safe school climate committee, school occupational safety. We have incident management teams that will actually deal with any type of incident that may happen at that school. And then crisis teams are more on the mental health side of things, social workers, counselors, on the prevention side. And I'll talk a little bit about that in some upcoming slides. Demis Region 2 School Safety and Security Group. Many of you know I've talked before in the presentations that I voluntarily chair that committee for Region 2. And it's 31 municipalities. And we get stakeholders from all different groups. And it's we meet bi-monthly. Many of the people here in this room are on that committee. And it's a great way to share ideas and concerns and network. And hey, what works for you, does it work for us? Can we blend this together and make it work for this other district? So there's a lot of networking that happens. And then lastly, Connecticut Center for School Safety and Crisis Preparation. They're out of WestCon. They've been in existence, I think, 4 years now. And it's grant funded through the state. And they're kind of set up like Demis with regions throughout the state, like the RESCs kind of. And they provide a lot of support on the prevention side. Very, very supportive with mental health training, behavioral threat assessment, which we'll talk about in a little bit, crisis teams. If we had something happen here in the district of a significant magnitude, they would actually offer services to come down with counseling teams. So prevention, just real quick, assessments and site inspections. We do annual safety and security inspections, done with our school resource officers through a couple of different programs they're trained in. One is through NASRO, which is SEPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. They have some other things that they do that as well. We do assessments when we do our grants for the state of Connecticut. Fire department, they do annual fire inspections through the facilities department just to make sure all of our life safety stuff and our fire code is up to date. And then occupational safety. We'll do visits with our workman's comp provider, United Heartland, just to make sure, hey, we're meeting what we need to do. And it provides a safe environment, but it also helps us with insurance as well. So school community awareness programs, just to kind of talk a little bit about some things here. And I know Ms. Preet talked about prevention council earlier. A lot of stuff. There's a lot of intertwining with what we do with MPC and with the police department on those things. Freshman forums and senior universities, giving some good information to incoming freshmen and outgoing seniors on safety, right? We're very involved with San Diego Promise programs, again through Christy Angeleski and the PPS department at the Start With Hello programs, to Say Somethings, signs of suicide. I know this year we did a lot with Say Something. I know that it was done at the high school and middle school levels, and the high school leadership groups actually went to the middle schools and instructed in it. It was very effective. Social media and online safety. I know they had someone come out recently to the middle schools and talk a little bit about, the responsible citizenship with social media and online stuff. And then lastly is our PSA video regarding school safety and security. So Dr. Kataya came up with a really great idea this year. Many of you may know that in the beginning of the school year, not just in Milford, but across the country, there was a lot of threats going on, right? And a lot of mis-sharing of information with peer groups. And we were struggling with it like everybody else in Connecticut and across the nation. And then we had some minor incidents here in our school district where students were sharing information. And a lot of parents started asking, well, how do you guys deal with this? What do you do? I want to know what happened to student A because of this. I want to know what happened to student B. And we all know that we can't really talk about that stuff, right? We can give them some broad information. So Dr. Kataya, Gary, and myself did, it was about 10-minute video, right, if that?
One take.
One take? we did 2 takes.
Would have been fine.
Because we wanted to see which one was better.
Well,
They both were good.
It was supposed to be a 4-minute video, but.
Yeah, but we liked it so much. So it was a really good PSA for people. It really gave an overview of like how we take that information in and what we can share and what we can't share on the school side, but also on the police department side, and how we partner and we immediately take that information in and we deal with it as credible until we determine it's not credible. So it really gave a good understanding of kind of what we did in an overview to parents, and I think it got a lot of good feedback from our school community. Social emotional learning, obviously, positive attitudes reduce the number of incidents that could be, targeted school violence. And that's one of the goals of this stuff is prevent targeted school violence, right? Prevention, prevention, prevention. A lot of the student support services support that, again, through our crisis response teams. Mental health screenings in buildings, additional counselors, right? People who can handle these things. Behavioral threat assessment. This has been it's been an uptick in this training and recognition of these programs for the last couple of years. Identifying red flags early and dealing with those, right? Providing those supports to those students so that we can prevent something from happening. And then lastly is securely. Securely is something we use here in district to monitor any type of online activity that may represent a threat to others or threat to self. And it works. We get some calls during the school day. Sometimes we get calls on weekends. Sometimes we're getting calls at 11 o'clock at night. And it's, someone may be searching something, they may be sending something in an email to another peer, and some of it's of concern. And we have a great partnership with the police department with this as well. If we have something that's immediate in nature, we'll call up and do a welfare check of that student. We'll notify the family. We'll work with the family moving forward, notify the school team so that those supports can be put in place. That's it for my prevention. So now, Louis Giancola couldn't be here tonight. He had a last-minute emergency. So I'm going to go through a little bit of his cybersecurity slides. I'll navigate this the best I can. So it's a really good overview of what they do. But there's been obviously an uptick in cybersecurity over the last couple of years, especially this year, right? And there's a lot of prevention that goes into place here in district. Louis and his team do a pretty good job of monitoring these things and mitigating what we have going on, right? There's different systems in place. Obviously, you can see the 4 bullet points there. That's what hackers are looking to do, right? They want to disrupt things. They want to try and get money. They want to hold data hostage. Damaging a reputation, not so much for a school district, maybe some private businesses more than that, but it's there, right? All these things are there. The threat landscape, I am going to flip here because Louis really has some good numbers in here. These I want to give you. Let me just get to this real quick. Let's see. All right, so just for your knowledge, all those bullet points up there, so switches and routers, the district has 243. We have 105 servers, 144 copiers and printers, over 5,000 active Chromebooks, over 1,800 laptops and desktops, VoIP phones, the voice over IP phone system, 630. Security cameras, yes, 763. I will tell you that our views, because we have dual and quad head cameras, we're over 800, so we have a really good, robust program with that. Data storage, 3, access points, 560, intercom and bell systems, including our A phones, which are our front door systems, 50, HVAC systems, 15, battery backups, network 1, employee time clocks, 30, and connected Wi-Fi devices, over 2,000. So I guess that there's a lot of stuff to support there, right? And I know I see a smile with your IT background, right?
You're doing great. We'll give a good report.
I could have had to do Louis' slides here.
You're doing great.
So there's a lot of stuff for them to keep track of and monitor, mitigate. Actually, you can see all the activities they're doing here. Lewis did want me to really highlight the backups and the multi-factor authentication. The multi-factor is actually required by everybody in the district now. And that's important because, again, there's so much that's going on, even with AI. You know, you used to be able to kind of look at some of these emails coming in, right, and kind of pick them apart, but with AI now, AI is actually correcting these typos and these spelling errors, right? So it's getting harder to really go through it all. So they're doing a lot of work on their end. So future considerations for them, obviously improved endpoint security, the improved email filtering, integration of AI. They wanted me to focus on that because really, when you think about it, we're morally putting that in place to really battle the ill will actors, right? Like people who are doing things. So we need AI to kind of monitor and mitigate those things. So that's a big piece of what they're doing right now in their programs. All right. Any questions on cybersecurity? That's a good job, right? Okay, excellent. So let me go into security layers now. So our security layers, we have access control. That could be our school gate guardian in our visitor management system. We have our front door intercom system, which is for our A phones. So if you go onto any of our schools, you go outside to the outside doors, you press the button. They're able to communicate with you two-way and look at your face on the camera. Many of those cameras are now being pulled into our Milestone video platform, so we can record those. So that's a big thing we started last year. Obviously, we have our security guards at our high schools, and we have our greeters at the middle school and elementary schools who handle that visitor management. Again, School Gate Guardian is a big piece of our program as well. That registers all our people in. We scan their IDs. It does a sex offender check in the database for all of our states to make sure that person's an approved visitor to be in there. In addition, we can also put unwanted visitors into that program. So if we know there's some type of ban letter for a parent or another person that can't be on our property, or if there's any type of court orders that we might have to abide by, we can put a notation in that system to refer to that document before you let that person in the building. Portable radio system. Again, these are individual schools have their own channels they talk on. We also have a district-wide channel, which is what we call the emergency channel. We test that the first school day of the week. With the fire department, we do a roll call of all 14 schools and central office. Everyone loves talking on the radio. They really enjoy it. But there's two purposes for that, right? One is to make sure that it's operational and it's working. And the second piece is to get people used to talking on it. Because when an emergency happens, it's going to be second nature for them to know how to press and hold and talk, or at least to listen, and what channel to use, and how to communicate with first responders in a different way they're not used to. That is monitored by the 911 center, so anything that comes in, they're listening to that channel. Our video camera system, again, individual schools have their interior and exterior cameras. Obviously, elementary schools have less than 4 in high school, right? Total views, as I mentioned before, over 800 views in district. With our camera replacement cycles we've been doing, there's been technology with dual head and quad head cameras, so I can take a location that was kind of limited with a single view and put a dual head up. And it's only one license, one fee, one cable. So we're starting to build that into our program. And all those cameras are accessible by the 911 center during emergencies. So going back to that exercise I talked about before, monitoring those cameras was a big piece to get them like where they needed to be in a building, right? Okay, additional layers here, public address systems, so inside, outside, exterior speakers, panic alarm devices, we call those quick link devices. I don't like to use the word panic because panic kind of means chaos and may signify we don't know what we're doing. We do know what we're doing. So we call them quick link devices. It's a quick link to the 911 center, right? It's a quick link to get that information to them. They know something's going on and they're sending resources to us. And they're starting to bring up the cameras, the floor plans, all the tools and technology we have in place to reduce the time it takes for them to know what's going on and get there. Blue lights, there's several of these installed inside and outside of the schools. Inside the schools, they're in our cafeterias and in our lunchrooms. and then outside, they're at the most frequently used doors. They're in areas near playgrounds. So those are a big part of our lockdown procedure, so if those go off, people are trained to know that if a blue light's on, there's a lockdown going on. So, mass notification system, we've talked about alerts before with you. This is a new technology we've had over the last 2 years. So, prior to this, for some new board members, if we had to announce an emergency in our buildings, we were announcing over a PA system. It really limited what we could do. We enhanced that so that we can make those PA notifications from anywhere in the building, but still it limited things. Someone had to get on there. When you're stressed, you get tunnel vision. So having someone make those announcements could be challenging sometimes, especially during an emergency. Alert us, we have pre-recorded messages for the identified threats and hazards we have in the district. So it takes the guesswork out of it. So you see in the middle there, there's 3 ways they can activate an alert us message. It could be done through a desktop console, it could be done through a phone app, or it can be done through a quick link device for lockdowns only. So there's a lot of different ways they could do this. If they want to get on the PA system and talk, they could do that. But the alert us hits a lot of endpoints. So you can see there's 6 endpoints. It goes to the 911 center automatically. It activates a beacon there and it tells them what's going on. It'll send the same beacon in our cafeterias, message to that. It'll do a desktop and laptop override. I know Mr. Brennan enjoys that when we do a lot of drills in our schools because we get them all, so technically we're getting like 144, and Dr. Katai gets them too if she likes it.
On every device we own.
Yeah, like in the middle of a meeting, we'll start to zero their computer and everything. But it works well. It'll push to a mobile phone app, so if people want to download the phone app voluntarily. That's really great for our traveling staff that are going to multiple buildings. Again, the PA system, we've integrated the PA system with a text-to-speech feature for that, and then our blue strobe lights are integrated as well. So a lot of work went into this over the past few years. We've had huge success. Again, I know the school resource officers help with the lockdown drills, and they'll facilitate the use of alerts with some of the administrators. Like some of them will send it, and then they'll have somebody else cancel it and send the all clear message. So people are really getting hands-on with that system, and it's working very well. All right, so now we'll go to partnerships. I'll turn over to Captain Del Monte.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Garen Del Monte. I'm a captain with the police department. I've been doing this for 17 years now, and I think for 16 of those 17, I've been in Milford Public Schools in some capacity. Dare instructor, SRO, what have you. Now I have the great fortune of overseeing the SRO program and talking to Jeff every hour of every day. So I have the SROs with me, and for the first time in, I think, 10 years, they are at their first board meeting. So I thought it was important to get some face time with you all. So we have Officer Corey Anafrio, he's at Law. Officer Michaela Kreitman, she is at Foreign, and fairly new to the Foreign High School. Officer Steve Lachavo is at East Shore. Officer Paige Bodner is brand new to West Shore Middle School. And Officer Karen Banks is at Harborside and the Academy. They did not want to talk, so I will leave them. I know I've said this before. I always try to sell the program and tell you how great it is. I probably don't need to sell it anymore, but I'm going to do that anyway. So just bear with me a little bit. So the SROs are nationally trained and nationally certified through the National Association of School Resource Officers. They go through a basic and advanced SRO program. I believe the basic is 80 hours, and the advanced is another 40 or something like that. So they're basically taught how to exist within your schools, which is a Herculean task for a police officer sometimes, right? But the course is extremely in-depth. It's taught by a collaboration of educators and police officers to get the most effective program back into the community that we can get. We talked about crime prevention through environmental design, which basically looks at the physical site of the school and how we can improve security measures, traffic flow, pedestrian flow, things like that. Adolescent mental health training or mental health first aid, behavioral threat assessment training, school-based law, active aggressor training, autism awareness and understanding students with special needs, understanding the teen brain, implicit bias, restorative practice. We do go through all the restorative practice workshops. They will sit on the juvenile diversion boards if and when we have them for restorative justice. And they are highly, highly involved in Milford Public Schools, and I'll show you that through a graphic in a second. You may be wondering, what do they do all day? So obviously their uniformed presence has an effect for security, that's great. But they are there to be mentors and coaches and role models for the kids and resources for our staff members. They liaison with school employees, DCF, Bridges, Clifford Beers, the Bethel Shelter, Milford Public Library. We have really good relationships here in Milford that I say this all the time, and I will tell you this until I can't say it anymore. These relationships do not exist in every district. Milford is a very, very special community where all the stakeholders, all the community agencies, all have a really good working relationship with each other. So that graph, the really tiny little squares are hard to see, and that's a good thing. So those blue lines are the SRO calls for service that have been documented since their inception in 2012, 2013. And you're probably going, Garen, why are the SROs interacting so often with our students? Because they're supposed to. So they are interacting by sitting at the lunch table with them in the cafeteria, having restorative meetings, having conferences, sitting in with the principal or assistant principal, sitting in with the counselors, walking the hallways, just sitting in their office with an open door and kids just happen to walk in. So there are plenty of opportunities for the SROs to form relationships throughout the school day. And once they got into schools, they started building rapport and trust with all their students. Trust me when I say this from experience and from all of them, testimonials from all of them, they tell us everything, right? Everything. And that is exactly what we want. They are comfortable. They have now started to see past the uniform and to see the human beings that we are behind the badge, and they trust us and they have full confidence that we will make the best decisions for them moving forward. Those small little squares are school-based arrests, DCF referrals, and mental health referrals. We want to keep those as small as we possibly can. To further explain that, I'll kind of go to this graphic here. So 2012, 2013, we were not in Milford Public Schools yet. If Milford Public Schools had a police officer in the building, it's because they called us there. And you can see that we had about 700 calls for service in Milford Public Schools buildings that year. No SROs present. And about 28 school-based arrests. If you fast forward all the way to last year, there's 1,100 calls for service at the school, we'll say. But that's because the SROs are documenting everything that they're doing. It's not because something was wrong. It's because we're trying to justify what we're doing and show how many relationships we're having. 0 school-based arrests last year. The thing that we are seeing increase is the mental health and emotional health needs of our students. So we are making more DCF referrals, we are making more mental health referrals than we ever have before. And we are also now enlisting the help of our police department social workers. So for those of you that don't know, we have 2 full-time social workers at the Milford Police Department and 3 social work interns this year. Usually it's 2, but we took on 1 more. And they were hired full-time in January of 22. So since then, they've made just over 50 referrals to our social workers to maintain contact with our students' families outside of school to help facilitate a smoother learning environment when they're back in the building. You know, you guys can jump in anytime you want.
You're doing a great job, Pep.
What is PREE? PREE, what is that?
Police request for emergency examination.
Okay.
So that's when, if a student makes any sort of suicidal ideation, they have to get sent to a hospital for an evaluation by a medical doctor.
And with the social workers, our social workers in specific, this past few months ago, we had that tragic incident with the 2 of our students, and we used our social workers to come over to the school and help with our resources because the social workers at the school were stretched too thin. So our social workers came over to the school and helped facilitate these 2 girls coming back to the school who just experienced a tragic incident and their friend groups. So it's both, not just us, but it's using our resources as well to help with school resources.
Great. Yeah, thank you. DARE. We have brought DARE back to the elementary schools, I believe a few years ago. Most of you probably think of DARE or remember DARE as the late 80s, early 90s DARE curriculum of drugs are bad. And that was it. It has evolved much, much more since then. It is really just centered around the kids making good decisions. Good, healthy decisions. Do we talk about drugs and alcohol? A little bit. Peer pressure and bullying? A lot. And social media? A lot more. It is based on the SEL models for learning. It has been compared directly with the Board of Education curriculum. So I sat down with Sean Smith before his departure and Dr. Deacon when he came over, and we literally compared both curriculums together to make sure that it aligns with what the district is putting out there as well. Because of that success, we have now brought DARE into the middle school level because there's a gap that we're noticing between the 5th grade DARE curriculum and now the kids going into high school. So 7th grade has now very nicely decided to bring in the DARE curriculum. It's called Keeping It Real, Refuse, Explain, Avoid, and Leave. And 2 of our middle school SROs, Officer LaChalo and Officer Banks, are now teaching the program at Harborside and East Shore. Paige may not know it yet, but we're going to send her to certification this summer to bring it to West Shore. But again, it's centered around good decision making, but now as the kids are getting older, there's lessons that provide tools to guard their mental health and protect their identity. This is another one that has also been compared to district curriculum for like the health curriculum and is being kind of co-taught with some of the health teachers in the middle school level. Anything I forgot for you guys? Middle school SROs are responsible for their feeder elementary schools. So they do all the crisis drills, they do some visits, because we want them to be familiar to the 4th and 5th graders that will eventually transition into middle school. So it gives some nice familiarity for that. And I think
we'll also get some phone calls from some of the principals at the elementary level. And if they're having any issues within the school, we'll actually go over there and try to mitigate any problems or any things that come up. I've had a couple happen this year. You know, the principal calls, they're like, hey, Steve, we need you over here. I'm like, all right, I'll be right there. So that's another face-to-face interaction, not only with the admin in that building, some of the staff, but also the kids see it. So, you know, if I'm wrapping up an issue at Live Oaks, I'll go walk around the building and I'll go pop in a classroom or two and just say hello. And just to make that face-to-face connection, because a lot of those students that are at the feeder schools that I go see, they come to East Shore. So at least they have a face, so when they go in the building, they're like, oh yeah, it's Officer Al. So it's just that community piece, and that just sense of belonging that I know Milford Public Schools tries to push on their students. So.
Great, thank you. Any questions about the SRO program at all? Come on.
Mr. Smith?
So I'll
say it if you want.
It's less of a, I guess there's a question, but first, before I do have to do the shameless plug about how awesome the work you guys do. And if for those of you here or watching at home, if there is anybody, I had the privilege of doing the Milford Citizens Police Academy last year, and if this presentation is interesting, that's even more impressive to see all the work that goes on behind the scenes. So it was really cool. And I guess the two questions on the SRO stuff is, first, not to make these meetings longer, but I don't know if anybody else would be interested, but I totally geek out on understanding the 2025 DARE program, whether it is in like a separate presentation or like the ride-along version of like tagging along, something like that. That'd be a thing that I'd be interested in.
Okay.
And then the question, you guys have the 2 social workers on your department. We've also, in last year's budget, we have the partnership with Bridges. How is your interaction with those social workers and those other mental health services? Because one of the things that, there was just a press conference this morning with the Attorney General rolling out a piece of legislation really focused on social media because of what we know, right, is that death by suicide is the leading cause of children ages 15 to 24, and increases in anxiety, and it has exploded since 2010. And so we want to make sure we're providing and fully integrating all those resources we have for our kids in schools.
Yeah, so as I said, Milford is rare in the fact that we can communicate with pretty much anybody that's in this town. So our social workers have a really good relationship with Bridges, Emergency Mobile Psych, our 2-on-1 referrals. They also sit on several task forces here in town, but we also have an active partnership with maybe 50 private practices centered between youth and adult and elderly resources, where if we call them, and they're locally based, if we call them and we say, hey, we have this client, we think they'd fit well in your practice, that practice will be very amenable to accepting the client on our behalf.
Ms. Doyle?
Thank you. It's interesting to look at the numbers of arrests to go from 16 to 0. That's commendable. That's clearly a lot of your work that's been going on in the classrooms, in the school, and being aware and catching things before they become an issue. I know we've had discussions about expulsions. How much are SROs involved in the expulsion process?
0. Less than 0. Preferably way less than 0. So the only way that we would ever get involved in expulsions is if we're subpoenaed to testify in said case.
Okay.
So, and the only way now that an arrest will happen, I'm not confident that a 0 will last forever, you know, but is if it needs to, is if it's absolutely necessary. Arrests can't be punitive for school-based behaviors or anything like that.
Right.
It's because it needs to happen based on some totality of what occurred within the building.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Questions on this side? Ms. Mahler?
Less of a question and more of a, as a very proud parent of a very recent 5th grade DARE graduate, I can tell you that the 24-25 program is definitely not what we did. It is way different, and shout out to Officer Jay. It's fantastic. So had no idea really what to expect going into that, but really well done. So.
Great, thank you.
This may be more for Dr. Kutaya, but we've talked a lot about the mental health needs of our kids. So I'm looking at the police request for emergency evaluation numbers, which are just so high, you know, just so, it's just so disheartening to see these numbers. I'd like to, not a conversation for tonight, but, you know, to keep that on the forefront, what other things we can be doing in district to try to mitigate these feelings that are going on in our kids.
I don't know if everybody knows this, so kind of piggybacking off that. So police officers by statute are bound to send somebody for an emergency evaluation. It's Connecticut General Statute 17A503. So if somebody is a risk of harm to themselves or somebody else, we have to have them evaluated by a medical doctor. We can't assume that they'll be okay when they leave our site. So yeah, those numbers are concerning, and we would love for those numbers to come down, and we're trying to work at that by having relationships with the social workers in and outside of the school, in the police department, and working to kind of get ahead of the curve and really be proactive in addressing the mental health needs.
I have firsthand experience with that, so I know that you take it very seriously.
Yes.
Anybody else?
I just wanted to piggyback off of that. I know we had mentioned Bridges Healthcare being in the school systems now, and this is our first year at East Shore where we have a Bridges Healthcare clinician. And if we do send somebody on a pre and they end up going to the hospital and they do all those things, there is a communication between the social worker at the hospital and the social worker and or counselor at the school. The next day, or when they are deemed they're ready to come back to the school, we'll have a reentry meeting, and we'll kind of go over like what are some next steps, what are some things you could do in the building, what are some strategies, safety plan, things that you can use, but also where it could be a little bit difficult to try to get those clinicians outside of the building. We have a clinician in-house, and we have almost 30 referrals now to that one clinician in just the past several months, and I think that's fantastic. So it's just another layer to help these kids, especially with their social emotional needs.
Another piece on those pre-numbers, and I don't have real numbers behind this, just from my observations and experiences in my school specifically. Not anybody, but most that I have sent on a pre, I have never sent again. So it's that one instance that triggered them, that they were in danger, that they went and got seen, and then now they got the resources that they needed at that time, unfortunately, that they didn't have, but now they do, because of the support staff within the school.
Yeah, it's a great point.
So it's repeats really very rarely happen for the same person.
Mr. Smith?
I would just like to say, I differ in your opinion in that the pre-numbers aren't great, but I'd much rather see them, I'd much rather have the referrals that were unnecessary than to let someone slip through the cracks. And like as in a previous chapter of my life, I worked in the ambulance, and having an adult sign a refusal for transport is a lot different than having a child, and I'd much rather have the child get the eval and move forward. So I just thank you guys for all the work you do.
Yeah, the other way that you can look at that is they're so trusted and the kids are so comfortable with them, they will go to them in their most vulnerable state
Yeah.
and say, hey, this is going on at home, or I'm feeling this type of way right now. So we could look at it as a compliment to their work too, that these kids are getting the help that they need. We know that that trip to the hospital is not the smoothest all the time, right? It's a little traumatizing in and of itself. So we would like to try and just kind of stay ahead of that.
All right, move on to the next piece of this. Fire department?
No, I'm looking.
So just to wrap up with partnerships, so our Milford Fire Department, we have a very strong partnership with them as well. Fire Marshal's office actually takes the 4 fire marshals and they split up buildings between them and act as liaisons. And they help out, again, with annual inspections, they help out with drills, feedback from any type of incidents we deal with, fire prevention programs, the poster contest, which is a huge hit every year at the elementary level. So they do a great job. Their names are on the right there for your viewing and in your packets. Milford Health Department, again, you can see up there, they do a lot of things for us, right? School nursing program, food service, athletics. They sit on our committees on the individual and district levels. And during the pandemic, they were true partners for us, right? They helped us navigate through the unknown and make the best environments for our students and our staff during that time. Student transportation with Durham, again, school bus evacuation drills. They're available for emergency transportations and sheltering if we have to evacuate a building in the middle of the winter. Bus drivers take their buses home sometimes, and they're with it at school in 5 minutes. So true partnership with them, and again, they sit on all of our committees as well. Just to list some other partners, and I've talked about a few of these before already, so I won't repeat those. The third bullet there is CTIC, the Connecticut Intelligence Center. It's a fusion center. They collect data not only here in Connecticut, but nationwide. In the very beginning of the school year, with all those national threats going around and the misinformation being shared, they were a key partner in helping us navigate through that stuff. They really enhanced their partnerships with the public schools here in Connecticut, with the new director this year especially. Cyber Security Infrastructure Agency, that's on the federal level, FBI. We set on a couple of focus groups with them for behavioral threat stuff. And then last but not least, our biggest partners is our school community, right? Our students, our staff, our families. You've heard Del Monte's presentation tonight, my stuff in the beginning. They're our #1 priority for safety, right? We want to provide those safe environments. Having them have those partnerships with us and sharing information with us is key. Last slide is future considerations. Just to go over a broad overview of some things, we'd like to expand our alert system in some of the buildings with some devices. Video surveillance equipment upgrades. We'll keep going through our replacement cycles. A lot of the old cameras we have are 1 megapixel, now we're going to 5 megapixel. The new cameras have AI technology. A lot of new stuff, new features that we're looking to do. Enhanced situational awareness and training. That's here internally with our staff and our students, but also with our external partners, right? Enhanced physical security for the buildings. That would be for all 14 schools. And then lastly, explore additional layers of security at the elementary school levels in future years. And that's the end of the presentation. If anyone has any questions.
Any questions for
Other items?
Mr. Nielsen on the general presentation? Ms. Mahler?
Just one, fairly easy, then I'm done. When we're talking about the security layers at our varying facilities, do those also cover what I would consider sort of the off-campus facilities, the athletic facilities, the soccer fields, the ball fields that are beyond sort of the initial perimeter of the buildings?
Yes. So we'll look at, cameras, for example, with those areas, the range of the PA systems, fencing, kind of a territorial reinforcement of things, signage.
Okay.
et
Blue
cetera.
lights? Do
Blue
those
lights.
extend that
It's
far?
one of the things we're looking at in the future.
Okay.
What kind of lights?
The blue lights?
Oh.
The blue lights,
Yeah.
the call boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Big fan of blue lights.
Ms. Preet?
Just more a comment. It's funny when you mentioned that a substitute had mentioned that she felt very comfortable when she was given the training, as opposed to other districts that have substituted that. That is very true. I remember when I did substitute for about 18 months and going through the videos and taking it through, and it was very professional. I felt, it's like the part-time employee getting involved, getting, invited to the all-employee picnic or something. You don't feel like you're like important, but it was nice that that training was there, because I actually did have, coincidentally, a lockdown drill, and fire, like I had to experience it all, and I knew what to do by watching the video. So it was really nice experience to be able to be a part of that. And then also just the SROs who are new, thank you. Just a historical background, 2012, 2013, before Sandy Hook even happened, we were talking about this in Milford, and there was a lot of parent pushback. Like, why do we have to have armed, uniformed officers in the buildings? Can't they just be, the detectives, we're in the shirt and tie? So I did have some conversations back then with Chief Mello, and it was definitely an education for the parents to know that, this is a good thing. This is, so it took a lot of convincing to implement the program, and I know that the program has grown and is very, very respected in the entire Milford community right now. And that's a testament to the great job you guys do. And I do remember another time I was at East Shore, and I think Officer LaChavo, you were walking down the hallway and some kids were goofing around and they stopped. You know what I mean? Like these 8th graders, they think they're all cool, and then you're walking there and they were like, so it's just a nice presence. It's a nice respect, both sides. I saw it firsthand. So I love the program, and thank you very much for all you do.
Thank you.
Scobie?
So I have a question about the drills. You mentioned that you do 11 drills per year for the crises, 2 per year for the bus safety drills. So you have like plans set in place for these. You also mentioned with the first responder exercises, you did one in April for elementary, over the summer for middle schools and high schools coming up. Do you have a plan in place for how often you're going to do these? I assume it's not going to be a one-off. Are you going to do these annually or
Are you referring to exercises or?
The exercises to help the officers, be accustomed to the tech that you have on each campus so that they're kind of aware of it.
Yeah, so we would like to do those annually. Obviously, there are some more things we do too. We do a lot of meet and greet programs where the officers who were on patrol, or the Detective Bureau officers, or the Traffic Division officers who work days, are going and meeting with the SROs at their schools and meeting the administrators, learning the footprint of the building, and also going and observing drills to see how we respond to things. So there's a lot of other things we do. I just gave you kind of the tip of the iceberg of what we do, but there's a lot of interaction with things throughout the year with them.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Doyle?
Thank you. Thank you again for a great presentation, and the Milford really is set apart from a lot of others, and we appreciate that. We've mentioned before, you hear the entire meeting. We are going through a facility study in a grand picture idea. What are measures that you can't tell us all the measures. We know certain ones. We can't talk about all the security ones, but there are broad strokes that we can think about when we're implementing, if we made a good decision about new buildings or repurposed buildings or things like that.
So without getting into specifics, there's a term out there called target hardening. Some of you may have heard of it before, some may have not. It's enhancing the physical security layout of that campus, right? So there are some suggestions that I would have, which will probably be at a later discussion, maybe an executive session, just to talk about those things. But yes, definitely there are some things we can consider.
Okay, great, thank you.
I think specifics like that are probably a few years down the road.
Right, but my point is that there's always opportunities that
Yes.
can be thought about in the future. We've done a fantastic job of doing those measures at our schools already as we're finishing up those projects, whether it's the type of glass we use, or the cameras, or the location, or the security entrances. We have those type of measures. We don't want to go into details, but they do exist, and it's distinct to see that.
Yes.
And as we're looking at, on that piece there, we're just looking at footprints. We're looking at buildings, and then the structure of the walls and the hardening layers will come onto that later. But if there are elements to that hardening component that have to do with physical structure and layout, that would potentially fall in where we are now. But
And there'd
It's
be
a
feedback
small
from-
slice, understood.
Feedback from myself, to be feedback from Lewis and IT, Pat and facility, because
Absolutely,
actually all,
yeah.
all of our things kind of work together.
These days especially, yeah. Poor Lewis isn't even here to speak up for himself, so, yeah.
And to that point, I would just like to just give a closing remark. Like, it's a shared responsibility, right? A lot of partnerships, there's a lot of things that happen, not only internally here with the different departments. You know, when I took this job, I never thought that I'd be working so closely with, you know, some of the PPS programs, right? Or facilities or IT, and actually being here for a year or two, I learned all that. And those, you know, those partnerships are very important. And again, the shared responsibility is what makes us successful. So.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. Thank you, Captain Del Monte, for being here, and SROs. We appreciate all that you do for us. And, yes.
Can I have a moment for Bushwick?
Certainly.
I just wanted to take a moment and just echo the board's sentiments. And first off, thank our SROs for all their efforts to help keep our students and staff safe in the schools, and for how they go above and beyond to really immerse themselves in the school system and build those connections and act as another trusted adult for our students. I've seen many of these firsthand, many of these interactions firsthand, so just want to thank you for everything you do in our school system with building those connections. Captain Del Monte, as you know, he's someone that I can't say enough about his availability. He's someone that at any moment of the day you can count on him to answer that phone call, any moment of the night as well. So we just really appreciate your collaboration and your perspective on things and your expertise. You saw him quote some law before with some numbers, so it's always nice to have his expertise with why that will work and why it won't. And,
We don't really know that was correct.
Yeah, we don't know. I said so confident. I just believe it now. So we just really appreciate you being a thought partner and always being available, and thank you for that. And, Mr. Nielsen, as always, I really appreciate everything you do for the school system. I know you mentioned in there about how these state plans are really, there's a lot of it is, you know, from federal and state agencies. It's kind of like a initial thinking point, but I just want to give you your due credit for how you take that plan and really customize it for local public schools and go above and beyond in thinking about what's next. How do we really push the envelope with what our next layer of security is? And then how do we implement policies, procedures, and practices with our students and staff to really make sure that these are helping to implement school safety across our whole district. So you're someone that takes your craft very seriously, and you always are researching and looking for future and the next trend and what we should be doing as a school system. So thank you to this team for everything you guys do for our school system.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Until next year. Dr. Kutaya, we'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. We'll let you guys go home and do homework as well. Okay, board members, we're going to move on to the talent management and development report. Ms. Capazza?
Thank you. In my monthly report, you have the listing of job postings, personnel recommendations, retirements, resignations, terminations, and stipend appointments. Excuse my voice. Nothing to report, additional to report or to touch on in my report, unless you guys have any questions.
Questions for Ms. Kapazna? I see none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll move on to the disbursement report from Mr. Brennan.
Thank you, Dr. Kyle, Ms. Glenn, members of the board. In your package, you will find a list of all the cash disbursements for over the amount of $500 for the month of January. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
That's the Medicare reimbursement on this one.
Yes.
That time of the year.
That time of the year.
Any questions for Mr. Brennan on the cash disbursement report? All right, thank you, Mr. Brennan.
And that concludes the superintendent's report, Ms. Glennon.
Thank you, Dr. Kutaya. All right, board members, we move on to consent agenda items. Motion. I forgot to write. Oh, okay, yeah, I got it right here, thank you. Motion that we approve the minutes of the January 13th, January 15th, January 16th, January 22nd, and January 27th meetings. For second?
Second that.
Second by Mr. Fermender. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Board comment. Any board members have anything to share? No? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at 9:10.
Motion to adjourn.
Anybody opposed to adjourning at 9:10? All right, then we're adjourned. Board members, see you in 2 weeks.